Multinational firms, particularly international oil and gas companies, have a reputation for a standardized workplace culture that spans across their global footprint in each territory where they operate. Question is, how do they do it? And how does it elicit long-term commitments from a healthy number of their employees? What is the human resources secret sauce in employee loyalty seen in a number of international oil and gas firms? Well, joining us to answer these questions is Dr. Jummy Olagunju, who is the CEO, Leadership and Relationship Consult. Dr. Olagunju has occupied various leadership positions during his 30 years in multinational oil and gas industries. He's a member of professional bodies such as the Council of Nigerian Mining Engineers and Geoscientists, the Nigerian Association of Petroleum Explorationists, and the Fellow Institute of Information Management, among others. Very detailed CV there. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you being on the show. So I was going to ask, when a lot of people talk about, employees who stick with multinational oil and gas firms for long periods of time, decades, some point to salary and say, is that where it is? Do we pinpoint salary and say that's the only reason why one would stay at a firm like that for so long?
Wow. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Fantastic.
And that question. Precisely, that's the general belief that the attraction, the driving force is the salary. But it's not really the case.
Okay.
So, to some extent, for the first few years or month, that could really guarantee in terms of security for people to stay. But after some time, expenses will catch up with whatever one is earning, no matter how much it is. And that's when you see cases of people that probably even earn more in other organizations, having a lot of things in terms of achievement, material things, more than the average person working in the oil industry. But you end up not seeing them remaining where they work. Staying that long, you hear about the attrition rate and everything. But in the oil industry, you see people being more stable,
right?
Not because of financial security, but there's something that the oil industries have in common, and that's communication of message of value to employees, making the average employee to feel valued and celebrated, respected. And there's this saying that in average every human being, there's a king, there's a fool. It's the person you appeal to that will respond to you. So there are some things that the oil industry subtly do to appeal to the king, the royalty in the average employee. And you see people taking ownership of the company processes. And there's something that the most companies also remotely do. They go beyond just extending the value, the message of value to the employee, but even to the family, to the spouse and the children. So even when you are not thinking of, do I want to stay in this company, you remember the attachment that the family are already having to the, to the company. Yeah, recently, we were doing some search in the house, doing a kind of house move.
Yeah.
And I came across a certificate awarded to my wife, I think about 25 years ago.
Okay. Wow.
Where, as a spouse, she was scheduled for defensive driving for spouse. Apart from the employees being sent on training in terms of safety, and that's your safety,
right.
Spouses were also extended. It was extended to spouses at that time. So I said, wow. So most of the time you see the oil companies communicating the message of we care about you, not just you alone, about your family. So it's not about the financial gain. It's about things being done to make sure that you feel valued. Within my first few years of starting where, I retired from Chevron after working for 30 years.
Yep.
I remember within the first 5 years of working, I think the 7th year precisely, I got a job offer from another company that is not a core oil and gas industry. And they doubled the pay with a promise of official car and a guarantee that I'll be traveling out anywhere in the world.
How about that?
Okay. So it was tempting, but by the time I discussed it with my wife, then we have 2 little children.
Yeah.
And it was, no, Daddy, you can't leave Chevron.
How about that?
So for me, deep down, I was developing cold feet, but the pay was attractive from the other company. At the end of the day, I turned it down. Okay? So that's the way it happens. So it's not just about the financial gain or the salary, but the general perception is about, it's a pay. And it's not just about Chevron. Every other oil company, there are this organizational culture that communicates message of value, respect, and the care for the employee. which if other companies can really imbibe that culture, it's not just the money alone, imbibe the culture of value. You see, human beings will always gravitate towards where they are celebrated.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that breakdown. Okay, so if we look at strategies for companies, when you think about strategy teams and how strategies change over time, with respect to what you've spoken to now about workplace culture, what is ingrained in these companies, does that change over time, or that's maintained in order to keep employees feeling as valued as you've mentioned that they do, especially for oil and gas firms?
Wow, thank you very much. Most of the oil and gas industry, what is done is to put processes in place to ensure that all these things, even when they have programs, they are within processes that are put in place. So such that even if somebody within the system is leaving, maybe a leadership position in the company is leaving, the processes remains. So you hear of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, even 20 years, you still see the processes being put in place. So it doesn't change over time. There's this saying that programs hardly outlive the initiator of programs for a long time. But processes will always outlive the initiators. So the oil and gas industries, they are fond of having processes put in place, which is the kind of thing I wish we as a country, Nigeria, can imbibe that culture. For example, let me just do a little bit of the...
Actually, just one quick sec. We've got some breaking news.
Yes,
I just have to break it. We'll continue at that point.
Okay,
We've got some breaking news here. Chief Ernest Shonekan, who headed the interim national government that succeeded the junta of General Ibrahim Babangida, has died. He died at a hospital in the Lekki area of Lagos State at the age of 85. Shonekan was the interim head of the Nigerian government between August 26th and November the 17th of 1993, before he was ousted in a coup led by the late General Sani Abacha. May he rest in peace. That is our breaking news there. Coming in, former Nigerian leader Ernest Shonekan dies at the age of 85. All right. Dr. Olagunju, please, I wanted you to do carry on when you're talking about being able to maintain these strategies over time. As far as you talked about imbibing culture, right? How Nigeria as a country should be imbibing these type of cultures that we've seen. What about where there's a clash between workplace culture and, I guess, the cultural norms of that particular country? For example, companies where employees from the CEO to interns are on a first name basis, and where they, I can't call you by your first name. I'll call you Dr. Olagunju, or I can't. So how do you see that mix there?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Within most of the oil companies, that's the oil and gas firms, we have this culture that is put in place. Like for example, in Chevron, it is called Chevron Way.
Okay.
Which highlights within the Chevron Way, you have what you call trust, integrity, respect. Within that, then partnership. So because what the companies have is something that is enviable, something that is great, that can be used, and the average employee is made to adopt it, and you take ownership of it. So when we now have a cultural setting within the system, there's always a balance. For example, we had some people that were our royal fathers, as in king, from their various homes. But they were still working. Maybe some of the smaller towns, not like a mega city, smaller towns, still working within the system, people that are first-class chief. But when official communications were to be sent out, because we are dealing with third-party government agencies, where these are well-respected, the use of Mr. or first name does not really conflict or affect the prestige of the people within the system. In fact, like my role then, before I retire, I had to do with communication with NNPC, DPR, and other government organizations. And when letters are being sent out, I know some people that will say, oh, why did you put my name as His Royal Highness instead of Mr.? So it's something that there are forums where people are addressed officially, and there are instances where the cultural setting is recognized. But it's not as if it's thrown overboard or dumped in the dustbin. No, people are valued, just as I said. And this is also highlighted through our diversity and inclusiveness. Appreciating people for who they are, teaching the average employees, getting us to be trained on how to communicate these values to people. So there wasn't really a challenge. And it's not just in Chevron, in other organizations, because we do have what we call sharing best practices.
Right.
And people come to the office, and some people will say an average employee in the oil industry is obsessed because of the way. So if somebody is not feeling valued with the title he holds, the position he holds, you hardly see people taking ownership of such processes. So there's no conflict per se in the way things are done, even though these companies came with the culture of the countries where they operated, where they are coming from, where they originated from. But they had the great culture about the right values, how to achieve great results, and how to do things. You know, I was saying something shortly about some of the processes being put in place, which makes the organization, the oil and gas firm, to be thick, is about the processes put in place that outlives generations.
Right.
And that's why I say if Nigeria as a country could imbibe that as a culture, we wouldn't have been where we are today. I know we are still work in progress. Let me give an example. About 4 decades ago, we had a program called Y, War Against Indiscipline, and KAI, Kick Against Indiscipline. It came as a program. Imagine if that had been made to be a process.
Right.
Put in an elementary school, put in the high school, in the colleges, and make it to even be part of the curriculum of phrases people were light every week. The child that would have been born at that time, 4 decades ago, will probably become a governor now with the right attitude in terms of discipline and things like that. These are things the oil and gas industries have put in place, making sure the processes continue, irrespective of who is there.
Fantastic. Processes versus programs. Yes. I want to ask you about, you mentioned diversity and inclusiveness.
Yes.
Is diversity recognition part and parcel of a successful workplace culture?
Wow.
That's a loaded question.
Oh,
there,
loaded. You know why I laughed is it so happened that I started off within my 30 years in the organization. My first 16 years happened to be in technical line, reservoir management, petroleum engineering, working on the field. Now, the companies had a program called diversity and inclusion, which is something that was brought in from the mother company that's in North America, coming to Nigeria with it. Now, with that diversity and inclusiveness put in place, it was introduced such that the average employee ended up taking ownership of it.
So it wasn't just from the top executive level, something that even the employees themselves were pushing.
Yes.
Right.
Then from there, people were assigned to be champions, to be people that would be the one preaching it. I mean, it's introduced such that people saw the benefit in it. And before you know it, it started driving productivity, started bringing about unity in the workplace, started making people to see the company as their own. In fact, it promotes what we call discretionary efforts among the employees. People taking ownership. You see people coming to work and they're addressing, like for example, Arise now, Arise TV, coming to work, and the average person, whether it's a cleaner, whether it's a security officer or a front desk staff, whatever may be the position, they come in and they act, behave, and think as if Arise belongs to them. So that is what diversity and inclusiveness, what it does. Diversity is not saying we are not different, but it's leverage on the differences in us. That even though we are different in view, age, status, qualification, religion, race, but the fact is, let's leverage on these differences for us to move the organization forward. Now, bringing it to the country, we are not denying the differences in us, but there is strength in those weaknesses, in those differences. And that's what the oil industry does. So one thing that I so much appreciate, I had to move from technical line to become the diversity and the diversity consultant, which I did for a long time. Even when I moved to another job in the government relation business services, I still did use an integral part of the diversity as part of the key thing, because that's the way to succeed. Now, what the company did is this, or which they are still doing. For everything that is being done in diversity and inclusiveness, there's always sharing of best practices with other oil industry. So it's not just Chevron alone.
So it's to the other players
in the sector. To the other players. So we end up becoming, you see Shell coming over, or we going to Shell. looking at what we are doing together, there was a time Chevron became the pivotal point where everybody revolved. And when we had a Diversity Day program, you see them coming over for them to be part of it. So it's something that the industry leverage on as the key to success. And sharing that best practices made everybody to achieve more.
Great stuff.
So,
just a quick minute to go. Can you mentioned sharing with other oil and gas firms. Can this be shared with other non-oil industries? Briefly, if you can.
Yes, this can be shared. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any platform for such presently, which I wish it can be. I remember every 2 years, there used to be oil and gas industry games where we have a fun fair like the AFCON that is going on now. We used to have, you even think it's another AFCON or another Olympic, the way people take it so seriously. I was actively involved. I was the tennis captain for Chevron for about 25 years. And with things like this being done, you see collaboration. You see people looking beyond the company. They see the other person as my partner. But that's within the oil and gas industry, which I've not seen so much of it within the finance sector, the banks, the breweries, and some other organizations. So it's something that is a matter of saying, this is the good things being done in this sector. Can we borrow a leaf from it? Can we take a cue from that one? I'll be able to do it. And that is where benchmarking comes in, not in a competitive way, even though the oil and gas were competitors among themselves, but they still found a way to work as a team. So in a nutshell, other companies can leverage on it if only they can really connect. That's why people like me have come out to become diversity consultants.
Dr. Jummy Olagunju, CEO, Leadership and Relationship Consultant, thank you so much for talking to us about workplace culture and what the country can learn from the oil and gas industry. Appreciate it.